Hey everybody, Dr. Rob Silverman here. I'm excited to be talking about functional neurology, all about functional neurology. I've got one of the leading experts in the world, Dr. Andy Barlow. He's one of my comrades. He is a board certified functional neurologist. Now, a lot of people checking in may not know what that is. Why don't you give them a little bit of background on your background?
Okay, well, Dr. Rob, thank you very much. Actually, I'm a chiropractor and got my chiropractic degree in 2000. I've been in public practice in Tupelo, Mississippi, the birthplace of Elvis Presley, since 2000. I also pursued my diplomate, studied neurology for 6 years. And what I focus on in my clinic, mainly from a neurological standpoint, is early onset Parkinsonism or early onset Alzheimer's, movement disorders, balance disorders. And when a patient comes into our clinic, what we do is we do a head to toe neurological examination. And we don't just block people into a neurological disorder. We also want to look at their brain. We also want to look at their peripheral nervous system. And we also want to look at their enteric nervous system. And we're going to be doing a gamut of different types of blood work, gluten sensitivity, malabsorption issues. And what we do in our clinic is we take functional neurology, functional medicine, and regenerative medicine, and we put all three of these together to optimize the recovery of a human being. The difference between functional neurology and what would be medical neurology is, like, for example, this is the way I explain it to my patients, is if you go out and crank your car and your car doesn't crank, well, the first thing you're going to do is lift the hood. That would be a symptom, car didn't crank. And let's say that the battery has been removed. Then you would go, wow, there's a part there that's missing. Or let's say we go out and crank our car and an anvil just happens to fall from the sky and hits the engine. We have a hard lesion there. We have something that's there in the engine that's not supposed to be there. Okay, these are hard lesions. And but what happens when the car doesn't crank and you lift the hood and all the pieces are there, all the parts are there, but things aren't connected? So what we do from a functional neurology standpoint is, yes, we look at the hard lesions as well, and I refer those people out to the appropriate healthcare professional for hard lesions. But then what about these soft lesions, like things that when people have focus, attention, and concentration disorders, which could be a form of early onset Alzheimer's, and then we end up with we walk into a room and we can't remember why we walked in there. We call someone on the phone and we can't remember why we called them. And we're in a conversation and we forget what we're talking about. In my clinic, with me as a functional neurologist, I take these things very, very seriously. But from a neurological standpoint, they would look at that as go, well, Miss Jones, you're 60 and some things are just going to happen as we get older. And again, so what we do is when people come in with these early types of symptoms, I take this very, very seriously, because I really am not, we look at end stage pathology to rule things in or out, but I want to get people way before end stage so we can actually allow these people to optimize their life and recovery so they can go on and have a happy, healthy life.
Well, you're doing an awful lot there. So most people don't know about functional neurology, and I think you did a great job in differentiating versus regular neurology. But functional neurology in the chiropractic market is one of the most elite, if not the most elite diplomates. It's very time consuming. Yep. Mm-hmm. It's very academic. It really hones the skills of diagnosis. And you mentioned a few conditions, diseases, Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, all neurodegenerative diseases, which are growing in America. Absolutely. I mean, it has been postulated that by the year 2050, half of Americans will have one symptomology of neurodegenerative disease. Mm-hmm. Now, I'm going to let you expound on this next statement. Okay. Most neurodegenerative diseases begin in the gut.
Yes. Okay. So let me kind of back up just a little bit, and then we'll move forward. If you actually, if everyone that was here today would, excuse me, would actually Google, just go online and Google, number of Americans with a neurological disorder, the number is truly astounding. It's over 100 million Americans have a neurological disorder. And then you look at the number of people in America who have an autoimmune disorder, and 1 out of every 5 people in America have an autoimmune disorder. So I'll give you an example. Right before I came on today, I had a doctor friend of mine from Phoenix that had sent me a text and said that he just received his Cyrex array number 5 report from one of his staff members, and she has an autoimmune disorder toward intrinsic factors. Okay. So see what happens in this situation, just that one problem, not being able to absorb B12 through our gut, this one thing, just the one thing that she has 3 autoimmune disorders. How do we know? We just got the test back. But one of these were autoimmune disorders to intrinsic factors. And all neurological function requires B12 to optimize neurological activity. So see, if you have an intrinsic factor to B12, doctors aren't looking at this at the early stages of a health problem, because we have stage 1 is what is called silent autoimmunity, which means the only way you know you're going to have a problem like this patient is we actually run the test and we find out, hey, you have an autoimmune disorder toward your intrinsic factor. Then as this problem progresses, we move from silent to what is called reactive autoimmune disorder. Now, this particular patient, for example, may start this reactive type of symptom may be that she's forgetting things. She has depression. She has anxiety. She has gastric reflux, for example, or gut motility. And literally, I'm talking about a patient or a staff member of a doctor, literally, that I spoke with like 10 minutes before I came on and did this interview today. So she has an autoimmune disorder to intrinsic factors. And then and she may have these symptoms for 40 years, which means she goes into the medical realm and she may have neuropathy. She may again have brain fog. She may have depression. She may have insomnia, all because of this intrinsic factor that nobody's looking at. So my point here, when it comes to a medical neurologist, they're great at treating the symptom, okay, but giving her a drug or an SSRI because she has, depression or anxiety is not going to solve this autoimmune intrinsic factor disorder. And then as we continue to progress, then this could lead into issues like possible Alzheimer's, early onset of Alzheimer's, forgetfulness, frontal temporal demise. And see, we found we found out this is actually an autoimmune disorder in this particular person, and we know that that to B12 intrinsic factors, and this can cause a whole host of neurological disorders. And again, see, this is a gut problem. So B12, autoimmune, intrinsic factors, okay, she cannot absorb those, which means she's either going to have to take them through a B12 injection or sublingual. And so again, and by the way, too, see, this lady also has a leaky gut. We use another type of test that's called Cyrex array number 2. Excuse me. And on this, so see, this one lady, she has leaky gut, and see, doctors know about intestinal permeability. I don't use the term intestinal permeability with my patients because it's very confusing. So leaky gut, and I explain a leaky gut to a patient like a screen door. A screen door, what it does is it lets air in and keeps bugs out. All right. And the same thing with your gut. Let's say, for example, the screen door. You've got some kids out in the street playing baseball, and somebody throws a baseball through your window or your screen. And now what happens is you're letting bugs from the outside get into your house. And we have 2 options. We can either treat the symptom, okay, and spray the bugs, or we can actually go back and fix the lining of your screen. And to me, it would make more sense to fix the lining of the screen. Same situation here is in our gut, we have a gut lining, much like your screen. It lets digested food particles into your sterile bloodstream, and then it keeps everything else in your gut. Now, when our gut gets breached, now we let undigested proteins in, lipopolysaccharides get in, which can be utterly devastating to every part of your body. We can let gluten sensitivity, if you have a gluten problem, undigested gluten in, undigested casein into the bloodstream. And so again, this lady doesn't just have an intrinsic factor issue, autoimmunity. She also has a leaky gut. And see, what we have to do, what I do in my clinic is I don't look at this as a linear problem. Okay. Meaning, just hypothetically, this patient comes in with peripheral neuropathy. And if all you've done is specialize in neurology, you would treat the blinky light syndrome, which is the neuropathy. And see, like this patient is, we go in here and we do red light therapy, we do stimulation, and then, but she still has a B12 deficiency. She still has a B12 intrinsic factor that's a gut problem, an autoimmune disorder, and she also has a leaky gut. So see, this is why when people come in to my clinic, and this is why I see people currently from 17 different states that fly all the way to Tupelo, Mississippi for me to see them, is because I don't look at them from a linear fashion. Yes, I'm an expert in neurology and metabolic care, but the point is I come in and do an exam with a clean sheet of paper, and I do a head-to-toe neurological exam, and we look at them metabolically, because every single person that comes into my clinic has a different metabolic disorder that needs to be addressed in a different neurological aspect. You have 10 people with neuropathy, just something simple. 10 people that have symptoms of neuropathy, and each one of those, every single person would have an underlying mechanism or multiple mechanisms that's driving their symptom. So if I'm looking at things linear, when I find the first thing like B12 intrinsic factors, and if I don't look at the woman's leaky gut, then see, I'm just looking at, linear intrinsic factors, and then we're going to do red light therapy, and then we're going to do possible regenerative medicine on her feet and laser therapy, and we're still not going to address her leaky gut. So in this clinic, it's all encompassing head to toe neurological exam and then metabolic testing to find out what it is that's driving this. Again, I coined this blinky light syndrome, whatever the symptom is the patient comes in with.
So that's a lot to unpack, but
yeah, well, I'm sorry. I give 20-hour seminars at one, so it's sometimes I get to talking and I need to pump a brakes. I understand that.
Oh, it's all good. It's a lot to unpack, like I said, and that's great because there's a lot of gems all in here. One, to paraphrase, you're looking at the body from the inside out, and you're looking at multiple factors. You're not just honing in. So you realize that a symptom is an indication of a system going wrong, using those systems to try and isolate root cause resolution while you personalize it for each of your patients. Absolutely. But I just wanted to reiterate, I don't think people realize the factoids that you gave were great. 100 million Americans have neurological disorders. That's 1 in 3.3. Yeah. Obviously, that's a lot. 1 in 5 have autoimmune disorders. The body's attacking itself.
Right.
So you're already starting out with a more than compromised immune system. And here we are talking about, pandemics, endemics, and things of that nature. You look at the gut, I think your screen door example was fabulous. So the gut is a single layer epithelial cell made up of multiple proteins, but it has a thickness of a wet paper towel. So the screen is a great analogy, and it's trying to keep. I love the idea of bugs because it's true. Bugs, bacteria, viruses, fungi, and the like. So the open screen door, everything goes through. And I'll even add one thing. The first time the outside world meets the inside world is getting through that gut. So if it's not supposed to be there, what do you think your immune system is going to do? Absolutely. Now, I realize that you're talking all about these things because you're building up towards this crescendo of autoimmunity to neuroautoimmunity and neuroinflammation in the brain, which is where you live.
And one of the things that I would love to recommend to all of the doctors that are listening today is when our brain starts to decrease in its function, the first thing that we're going to lose is endurance. Okay. And endurance, the reason for this is just something simple like we're not getting enough oxygen into our body. All right. We're not getting enough adequate glucose. We need a steady supply of glucose, not insulin resistant, not hypofunctioning, all these spikes. It needs to stay consistent. And we have to have oxygen and glucose to actually allow the mitochondria to do its job, and that is to make ATP. So if we have anemia, if we have glucose dysregulation, if we have inflammation, if we have an autoimmune disorder, then what this will do, this will cause our mitochondria to decrease in its function. So we can't make the energy that our brain needs. And in the process of doing this, the first symptom that a patient will have is going to be loss of focus. We're going to have endurance issues. We're not going to be able to focus. We're not going to be able to stay on task. Like, for example, a person years ago may have been, just for example, when newspapers were something, but maybe have been able to read a newspaper from front to back, and now they read the first page and they're exhausted and they can't even remember what they read. And then as this progresses from focus, attention, and concentration, then we move in from the next level, depression, anxiety, and insomnia. And I always tell my patients, the more these you have, the worse your brain function. Now, again, the difference between me as a functional neurologist, looking at somebody from a functional standpoint and a metabolic standpoint, if they went to their doctor, their GP, or their medical neurologist, and said, "Doc, I'm 50 years old. I'm losing focus, attention. My concentration is just not what it used to be." Again, the patient is going to get a pat on the back and say, "Mr. Jones, you're 50. Things happen when you get 50." And then again, see, nobody that we just start to believe these things. And then again, we're not looking at blood sugar problems, anemia, inflammation. And see, all of these things, when people come into my clinic, I'll look at every one of these. I take these very, very seriously when a patient comes in. And please understand, with that 1 in 5 people who have an autoimmune disorder, remember, you have 3 stages of this. The first stage is silent. The second stage is reactive. And again, see, the reactive part is when patient has a symptom and they start going into the medical arena. And then the doctor starts prescribing the medication for a symptom and not actually addressing the underlying cause of the autoimmune disorder. And yet they get all the blood tests back and they're normal because they're running a standard lab. And then the patient won't get diagnosed until end-stage pathology. And that's the critical point, is they don't get diagnosed to end-stage pathology. But what happened to this, 20, 30, 40, 50 years of suffering, waiting for, and the key phrase is I hear a lot from patients going to the traditional medical doctor is wait and see. Let's wait and see what happens. And I'm like, this makes absolutely no sense to me, because if you have a leaky roof, and this is what I tell patients, if you have a leaky roof, okay, and the carpenter comes to your house and goes, "We have a leaky roof, no major damage is done yet, but let's just wait and see what happens," that the person would look at that contractor and go, "Please leave my house immediately." All right. But yet when a person dons a white lab coat and says the phrase, "Let's wait and see," for some reason, that's like the latest scientific cliche of, and I'm like, what are we waiting to see? End-stage kidney failure, end-stage rheumatoid arthritis, end-stage Parkinson's, end-stage Alzheimer's, and again, it's because I honestly think they don't know what to do, because this person in front of them has a symptom that's very debilitating, but yet they put them in an MRI, everything looks normal. They run a standard blood test, everything looks normal, and they're like, let's just wait and see what happens. And in our clinic, and if I may, this is why I wrote my first #1 new release bestseller, License to Heal: What to Do When Traditional Medicine Has Failed. And this I didn't realize how powerful this headline was, or this title was, because what does happen when traditional medicine has failed? Because we live in a world today where people come into my clinic every day, and they have this symptom, and they've got a Walmart bag full of drugs, and they're worse today than they were 10 years ago. And then I just wrote my second book. It just came out about 6 weeks ago. It's and your roadmap to overcoming depression, anxiety, insomnia, and chronic pain through the gut-brain connection. And this is why I tell patients who come in with depression, anxiety, insomnia, and chronic pain through the gut-brain connection. And this is why I tell patients who come in with depression, anxiety, insomnia, and chronic pain through the gut-brain connection. And this is why I tell patients who come in with depression, anxiety, insomnia, and chronic pain through the gut-brain connection. And this is why I tell patients who come in with depression, anxiety, insomnia, and chronic pain through the gut-brain connection. And this is why I tell patients who come in with depression, anxiety, insomnia, and chronic pain through the gut-brain connection. And this is why I tell patients who come in with depression, anxiety, insomnia, and chronic pain through the gut-brain connection. And this is why I tell patients who come in with depression, anxiety, insomnia, and chronic pain through the gut-brain connection. And this is why I tell patients who come in with depression, anxiety, insomnia, and chronic pain through the gut-brain connection. And this is w neurological disorders, I say, tell me one neurologist you went to that actually talked about your gut function. And of course, the answer is zero. And I tell patients, well, if you, and a matter of fact, I used this example yesterday. I said, if I have a car wreck on the way home and my head hits the windshield and, and my brain, my skull is cracked, I need a specialist. Okay. I need somebody to put all the pieces back together. But once somebody puts all the pieces back together, at that point, I need a generalist, because now I've got to do brain-based therapy for my brain. Research shows that within about 6 hours after having a concussion, you start the domino effect of a leaky gut, which means now I've got to deal with my gut dysfunction. And so we need somebody that's going to look at the whole body once this medical doctor, this surgeon, puts you back together. He's done his job. You were about to die. He gave you your life back. Now we have to, we got to do brain-based rehab. We got to get your gut fixed. And that's where I come in with our healthcare system.
That's a great one with the wait and see. Let me see if it goes away and everything. That is a medical model. And that doesn't work. And from the chiropractic perspective, once we diagnose, and, obviously as a functional neurologist, you have extensive diagnostic skills, you want to begin treatment because, we are very proactive. We're not reactive.
Right.
We don't want to wait. Right. Our vision across the board for American population is health first. It's not sick care. It's health care. Right. So you made some really good points. Now you talked about inflammation of the mitochondria. Interesting, the mitochondria, everybody knows ATP, the powerhouse of the cell. Mitochondria comes originally from the bacteria in the gut, and it communicates with the gut. And the number one mitochondrial organ in our body is your favorite organ without question, the brain. Yeah. Now, that said, we actually have a question for you.
Okay.
And there it is. It's right across the screen. So, can a chiropractic neurologist treat psychotic disorders?
Okay. The answer to that is, from a legal standpoint, no. Meaning that when a patient comes in to me and says, I have this symptom, okay, my job is, again, when we get to, let's just understand this, when we get to the point of actually naming a disease, we're at end-stage pathology. Okay. If you've deteriorated to the point where you can actually name something, we're at end-stage pathology. Can we still help these people? Yes. Okay. But if somebody came into my clinic and said, I've got this psychiatric disorder, schizophrenia, whatever, do you treat that? I'm going to say no, because what I do is I actually do a head-to-toe neurological exam. We do metabolic testing, and we treat metabolically and neurologically what we find. Okay. And so I'm not in the business of treating anything. My job is to do our exam, and then get this person to their optimal state of health and wellness. And when somebody has a psychiatric disorder, again, the first question I ask this human being is, when is the last time your psychiatrist or your neurologist talked about your gut function? And I have, as of yet, had a patient go, I've had 2 or 1. The answer is, I've had no person talking to me about my gut disorder. And see, again, the magic here, the magic that works in my clinic, and you can look at all these in my book. I've got tons of testimonials in my book, is that what we do is we address the brain and the gut simultaneously. All right. So when people have psychiatric disorders, they just want to treat the brain, and see, what we have to have in the brain is we have to have neuroplasticity, and we have to activate brain-derived neurotrophic factors. And by giving someone a drug does neither of those. And that's vitally important to understand from a person. And I appreciate the question that somebody asked, but my job, again, is to create neuroplasticity, to reconnect the brain to itself. And then we have to activate brain-derived neurotrophic factors. And to my knowledge, to date, there is not a drug on the planet that can do that. So, and see, the way you create neuroplasticity and activate brain-derived neurotrophic factors, we start to see this same system. We've got to get our blood sugar under control. We've got to get our anemia under control. We've got to decrease our inflammation, and we've got to get rid of toxins. Because See, if you just have one of those four, I think we just mentioned 4 or 5 issues, any one of those is going to destroy your mitochondria. And so you have to have the mitochondria to produce brain-derived neurotrophic factors and neuroplasticity. And I know sometimes I go the long way around the barn, as we say in the South, to answer a question, but I want to be very specific for people to understand is we don't treat any psychiatric disorder, because all the patients come in and they may have seen 5 psychiatrists with 0 results because they keep looking at the brain and nobody's looking at the gut-brain connection to solve this problem.
You're speaking to the choir with me. Number 1, brain neurogenesis, the ability for the brain to wire together so it can fire together.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
that was about 2000, and we're popping up here. So I got some questions for you.
Okay.
So that gives the ability of the brain to grow back, if you will, their neurological functions. About 2013 was finally accepted, although the data goes 20 years prior to that. Neuroplasticity. The brain is neuroplastic. It's plastic. It's formable. The nerves, again, they go in hand. BDNF, brain-derived neurotrophic factors. Protein enzymes, which come from the gut to go to the brain, so that allow brain neurogenesis.
Yep.
So to me, the gut to the brain to the gut. Here's what I tell everybody in an epigrammatic fashion: whatever you do to your gut, you do to your brain. Whatever you do to your brain, do to your gut. In a millisecond.
Yep.
And I am echoing what you said. If you're going to somebody who's a brain expert and they're only doing the brain and they're forgetting the gut, they gave you a sandwich with no bologna.
Okay, I like that.
Or from New York, a bagel with no lox. How does that sound?
Yeah.
So here we go. We got a question.
Okay. Let's see.
We'd love to help you, but so somebody was asking for some help, and I put this up, and I got you. We can all help you, and certainly, obviously we don't want to talk too much about politics, but people at war, a lot of PTSD.
Right.
So why don't you go into that as a
okay? So again, with the PTSD, we are dealing with a brain-based problem. All right, and then remember, the brain cannot tell the difference between physical trauma and psychological trauma. So if I, again, we'll use the car wreck, for example. If I have a car wreck and my head hits the windshield, physical trauma. But in war, if I see someone shot, it's not physical trauma. We actually see this psychological trauma, and the brain can't distinguish between the two. It's trauma to the brain. Okay. And I think this is why it was so difficult for doctors, healthcare professionals, and family members for decades, probably most of human existence, is, if you see a big knot on somebody's head, you can go, wow, that's physical trauma. But if someone has a passing or sees somebody get shot, it's like you can't see the trauma from that. Okay. Now, so again, any type of trauma, physical or psychological, within 6 hours, the study showed that you start this chain of events. Your mitochondria, the inflammation in your brain, starts activating the mitochondria, and the mitochondria is part of the immune system in your brain. And so, like anything, it can become overreactive, and our mitochondria gets overstimulated. Now it starts to destroy our brain function, and we start to, what is called in neurology, we start to decrease the frequency of our brain. So that decreased frequency because of inflammation, and again, this could be physical or psychological trauma. And then we have our vagus nerve. Okay, that's the 80-20 function. It means 80% of sending information from the gut to the brain, and then 20% is the motor function. Now, the vagus nerve also controls the contractile element of our leaky gut. So see, when we lose function of our brain frequency of firing starts to slow down because of trauma. Then this frequency of firing is going to abnormally, it's going to cause our vagus nerve to start to decrease in its function. And now the gut function is intestinal permeability. The vagus nerve can't maintain the integrity here. And then our gut starts to leak. And now we start getting things from the outside of the body to this sterile environment. And then we start to release cytokines, inflammatory cytokines. Then our immune system starts to overreact. And then sometimes that I see with patients, in some situations, people have a car wreck, and then these things don't even really start to manifest into full-blown symptoms for 5, 10, even 20 years later. So it's not like these things a lot of times come on overnight, and a lot of times patients don't actually see a cause and effect relationship. And of course, I mean, I give you an example. I had a lady come in, this was a couple of years ago, had a car wreck, and she was unconscious for 30 minutes. And the reason she knew she was unconscious because the person that hit her and ran her off the road actually stayed until the ambulance got there. And she was completely unconscious until the ambulance got there. So, and it was about 30 minutes. So, and we fast forward this woman 20 years later, and she'd got migraine headaches, she'd got dizziness, neck pain, shoulder problems, and numbness in her hands. And then we start doing this entire neurological exam. And one of the first things I ask her is, tell me about your first car wreck. And she's like, well, 20 years ago, but I don't really know what that has to do with anything. And I go, well, I'm glad you said that, because it has something to do with everything that's going on with you. Because after the car wreck, within 6 hours, we start this, your brain starts to decrease in its function. And you have this little nerve that's called the vagus nerve that controls your gut motility. And then when it starts to malfunction, we relax the intestinal permeability, and things start to leak in from the gut to the bloodstream. And then we start to have an entire cascade of negative health impact because of that. And so again, it's, if we understand the science behind it, about we have a post-traumatic stress disorder, or we actually have a physical concussion, within about 6 hours, we start the domino effect of this leaky gut. And see, again, with leaky gut, just remember, we can have gastric reflux. That's one of the big ones. So I would strongly encourage all the doctors that are listening with patients, regardless of what they come in with, if they're suffering with any type of chronic health problem, just ask them. Just tell me about your focus, your attention, and concentration. So what you're doing there is you're asking about the integrity of their frontal lobe function and their brain. And then what about depression, anxiety, and insomnia? And then I go right into, okay, tell me about your digestion. Tell me about your gastric reflux. Oh, I got gastric reflux. Or just remember, they may be using some proton pump inhibitor medication that's suppressing that. So they go, well, I don't have a problem with my gut. But you see on their paperwork, they're taking these drugs to suppress that. Tell me about your gut motility, because see, the vagus nerve controls the motility of your gut function. One of the ones I love to ask patients about too is, tell me about your gallbladder. Oh, it's been removed 10 years ago. Well, see, we understand that the vagus nerve also doesn't just have to do with gut motility and maintaining the integrity of our gut lining. Your vagus nerve also is what allows your stomach to produce, one of the things that allows it to produce HCl. And then I talk about this in my second book, where the hydrochloric acid, see, it's kind of the domino effect that actually, it's like a dump. You hit the domino and then everything downstream falls. But if you don't have enough hydrochloric acid, now we can't break down our food. We can't actually stimulate the gallbladder to contract. So it becomes sluggish, and then we remove the gallbladder. And so anyway, hydrochloric acid is extremely important. And so how's our brain doing? We ask that question: focus, attention, and concentration, depression, anxiety, insomnia. Tell me about your gastric reflux. Tell me about going to the bathroom, your gut motility. Tell me, do you still have your gallbladder? And I want to know about, digestion, about eating protein. And I want to know about also eating carbohydrates or starchy food, because I want to know how well their pancreas is actually breaking things down. We want to look at small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. And then also we want to look at bloating and distension. So again, and so that goes back to the patient with asking, our doctor asking about the psychiatric disorder. And then see, we also run tests on gluten sensitivity, celiac, and malabsorption. And I do, one of the tests that I use, if you don't mind me talking about, is Interolab, interolab.com. And we run panel A2. Interolab.com, and it's panel A2. And I've been running these tests for at least 15 years. And literally, I've only had 2 patients. This is what's amazing. Because we run all the tests on people, I've only had 2 people in those 15 years that did not come back with a gluten gene or a celiac gene. Only 2. Okay. So what this means is, when those tests come back positive, because they do a gene test and then they do a fecal test to see if it's actually been turned on. So we do these tests on patients. And if you have this gluten gene or celiac gene, you have to eliminate gluten from your diet. So I do want this to resonate with doctors that's listening. In America, of the tests that we ran, I've only had 2. And this is what I wrote about in my second book. Actually, when I was writing this book and I sent it to the publisher, I actually had to rewrite a part of this book because I actually had another gentleman that came into the clinic, and he was the second one. And this was about probably 4 or 5 months ago. He was the second guy that came in with a 0. He did not have a gluten gene or a celiac gene. So, and we know that if you Google gluten sensitivity and psychiatric disorders, that gluten, the number one area that gluten attacks is going to be your central nervous system and peripheral nervous system, with it being the cerebellum being number 1 and myelin being number 2. Okay. So again, this is why when people come in, and they have a symptom, I just look at the symptom as a blinky light. Okay. This is your primary complaint. All right. And then what do I need to do to optimize your recovery? And we're going to do a head to toe neurological exam. We're going to do all of this metabolic testing and find out why the system is failing and why you have the symptom, with no preconceived ideas as to what we have to do to this person. We just let the exam tell us what's wrong, what systems have failed, and do metabolic testing to find out what do we have to do to address the metabolic issue to help this person achieve optimal recovery.
So you're going to test and not guess. And the vagus nerve.
I like that. I've never heard that before.
Right?
Yeah.
Chapter of an upcoming book. So we're going to talk about the vagus nerve, medulla oblongata down through the transverse colon. And what you're saying was how it innervates all the organs. I mean, the reason they named it the vagus was because it was the great wanderer. So huge in our field, vagus nerve stimulation. Now in the medical field, we do it more alternatively. They do it with a implant, which you and I both know we're really not robust on. Vagus nerve is great for the migrating motor complex, which moves the food bolus from the small to the large intestine. And what you were saying about the vagus nerve with digestion, we all know that when vagus nerve is decreased to tone, higher incidence of IBD, IBS, and you kind of said it, small intestinal bacteria overgrowth. And that's a big hurdle that we would have to jump into. But again, testing, you're looking, and the gluten, without question, gluten means glue. I tell everybody there's data out there that it's bad enough if you're allergic to it. It's bad if you're sensitive. It's bad if you're in remission. And it's bad if you're like me, got none of the above. It still promotes inflammation in the American diet because of something called glyphosate. So you're hitting on all the points. PPI, proton pump inhibitors. Wow, most people have decrease in stomach acid. This decrease, it's more. There's an article that just came out that PPIs increase the positivity in COVID, increase death in COVID. So obviously we want to try and avoid PPIs. Got a couple of questions that popped in. And everybody listening, please feel free. We've got a nice comment. I think you're going to want to see this, and then we'll get to a couple of questions.
All right. Hey, well, I will have to concur with that message right there.
There you go.
Thank you.
Here we go. Indeed.
I do train medical doctors, PhDs, nurse practitioners, and chiropractors. And before COVID, I literally trained medical doctors from Spain, and I had chiropractors all the way from I almost said New Jersey. I meant New Zealand, that actually have come to my clinic in Tupelo, Mississippi, to get trained through this functional neurology program that I have and if anybody wants to look this up, it's the barlowbrainandbody.com. barlowbrainandbody.com. That's just short for the Barlow Brain and Body Institute. So let's see, I'm interested to learn more about functional medicine. What program or courses would you recommend? Okay, now this is a good one. So everybody just listen up. So the first thing I would highly recommend, and I tell patients all the time, buy my book. And I'm telling everybody here, licensedtohealbook.com, buy that. Okay. And that book, we go through a gamut of health problems from a neurological standpoint and how we address this. Also, I give the vagal nerve stimulation in this book. So instead of getting a vagal nerve implant, there's actually therapy that we can do that takes about 3 minutes a day for people to stimulate their vagus nerve. And I go through that in my book. That's the #1 new release bestseller. If you go to highwaytohealthbook.com, this is my second #1 new release book, highwaytohealthbook.com. And this talks about depression, anxiety, insomnia, and chronic pain syndromes. Now, with this being said, let's go to this. The easiest way is go to getfreepreview.com, getfreepreview.com. And I've actually had this up. So when you go to getfreepreview.com, this is going to be talking about my next upcoming seminar, which is going to be in Conroe, Texas. Conroe, Texas is about 40 minutes outside of Houston. You can fly into George Bush International. And then this is my homepage here. My seminar will be March the 18th, 19th, and 20th. And if you come to this seminar, and this is the first time you've been to one of my seminars, I have a 100% money back guarantee. And that means you come to this seminar and you tell me that you didn't get anything out of it and you can't apply anything at this seminar, no questions asked, 100% money back guarantee. I've been training doctors for 12 years and I have given back 0 refunds. So I also have a frozen shoulder aspect that I do, and I have patients. You have to pay me up front for this. It takes two procedures, and we don't get full range of motion. In 2 visits, you get a full refund. So, and I tell that to my patients. And I'm telling you as a doctor, I try to make it as easy as I possibly can for doctors to come to my clinic and learn this functional neurology program. And I don't know how it's any other way to do it, to say, here's my website, here's different things that you can look at. I've written 2 books. I've got patient testimonials, doctor testimonials, and I'm giving a money back guarantee if you've never been to my seminars before. And so I'm interested to learn more about functional medicine. What program or course do you recommend? And that would be the next one coming up, March the 18th, 19th, and 20th. I videotape all of my seminars. So if you cannot come live to the seminar, I actually have I videotape every seminar that I give. I have 6 seminars that I give basically, and then I just wash, rinse, repeat, and then give them over again. Of course, there's new information each time. I get up at 4 o'clock in the morning to study. And so hopefully getting up at 4 o'clock in the morning, you better learn some new information every once in a while to bring to the good doctors. And so, and that would be the easiest way. And then if you go to barlowbrainandbody.com, there's a phone number on there, and you can actually use that phone number to contact me, and I'll be more than happy to talk with you about ever how I can help you. Because I'm in the service industry. I'm here to help doctors help their patients in a way that until they met me, they had no concept of what they were capable of doing and the lives that they were actually able to change. So that would be the best thing to do is barlowbrainandbody.com. That's my website. And then you can go to getfreepreview.com. And that would be the best first step or next step to take.
Outstanding. And I recommend the courses. Dr. Barlow and I have been talking. That's why I invited him on to the podcast. I mean, you gave a treasure trove of information.
And also, and thank you, Dr. Rob, also my seminars that I give are 20 hours, 20-hour seminars. The one that I have coming up is 12 hours of continuing education. And so doctors can come to my seminars, get the continuing education, and then also we can train you on how to market and how to help patients get their lives back. So I'm from Houston. Yes, this works. And
I think she's giving you kudos for discussing the gut.
Yeah.
Not to overlook the enteric nervous system. You mentioned it. Yeah. That's the #1 nervous system in the body.
Yeah, I had this was maybe 6-7 years ago. But I was given a seminar in Denver, and one of the doctors that was there, he was a medical doctor from Las Vegas, and I went through at the end and I asked everybody what they learned. And the medical doctor said, I learned that I need to go back to school and tell them I want my money back because nobody taught any of this information in school. So, and again, we're kind of taught to, do an exam, check off a box, and then move to the next one. And so and so it's in our clinic. Again, we don't have a protocol in here unless you call doing a head-to-toe neurological exam as a protocol and running all this metabolic care. We don't take any insurance. I run a 100% cash practice. People don't come into my clinic because I take insurance. They come into my clinic because I changed their life. And again, you don't have to take matter of fact, the things that I do, for me, insurance isn't going to cover it anyway. So, but it's people come into my clinic because their health is extremely valuable to them, and they want to pay tens of thousands of dollars to get their life back. And so,
I'm sorry, just everybody blowing up saying thank you, great information. You're getting big thumbs up from across the nation and some international people.
And again, I've been consulting doctors for 12 years. Doctors who know me know that I'm here. I do everything. That I have a family. I have an active practice. So if someone were to call me, and my number is on the website, but the barlowbrainandbody.com, I will get back with you as fast as I possibly can. And because I want to help you, take your practice to the next level, because me being able to help you take your practice to the next level is going to serve people that I will never be able to see, but I can help them by helping the doctor get to the next level from a metabolic standpoint and a neurological standpoint, and teaching them how to actually do these tests and to get these great outcomes with patients.
Outstanding. Well, they know how to get in touch with you. I encourage everybody to try and get in touch with you. We've got to get me down to one of your seminars. I got to upgrade absolutely got to get my functional neurology up even more. And look, it's been great. I mean, like, I was taking notes so I could share back. I'm going to go review them and get back to you in a couple of days.
Okay.
Everybody who didn't have the opportunity to hear this, hears this. Again, like I said, there's a treasure trove of factoids that are relatable to your practice and maybe as a patient to your life. I want to thank you for taking the time coming on the podcast today.
Thank you so much. And it's been a pleasure.
Everybody, it's been my pleasure. Dr. Rob Silverman, always yours in health.